Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines, your window into relationship, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
Welcome back to Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines. And this is a trauma-informed leadership series episode. But actually, it's a little different. This is a bonus pre-series episode because before we dive into the full 40-part journey, I want to step back and answer one really essential question. What is trauma-informed leadership? And why does it matter? Not just for government officials, CEOs, and organizational leaders, but also for parents, teachers, partners, and even for the way that we lead ourselves. If you've ever wondered why leaders rise and fall, why organizations burn out, why families fracture, and why politics feels like a battleground instead of a pathway forward, this episode is for you. Because trauma-informed leadership is not a buzzword. It's a survival skill for the modern world. Let's start with the basics. Trauma-informed leadership is leadership that understands how trauma, past or present, personal or collective, shapes human behavior, decision-making, relationships, and systems. It's not therapy. It's not about excusing bad behavior. It's about leading with the awareness that every person, every team, every organization carries hidden stories. Some of those stories include resilience. Some of them include wounds. Both matter. Trauma-informed leadership asks, how does stress affect decision-making? How do unresolved wounds shape conflict? How does organizational culture replicate harm or interrupt it? And most importantly, how can leaders regulate themselves so they don't spread chaos, but instead create stability, healing, and growth? So why this matters everywhere. You might be thinking, okay, Krista, that sounds nice, but I'm not a therapist. I'm a mayor, a principal, a CEO, a responder, a parent. Why should this matter to me? Here's why. Because trauma doesn't stay in therapy rooms. It shows up in boardrooms, classrooms, locker rooms, living rooms, and even in your bedrooms. Government leaders. Policy decisions are not abstract. They affect real people carrying trauma. Veterans, survivors of violence, children in crisis. Trauma-informed governance means writing laws and systems that don't re-traumatize, but actually heal. Imagine child welfare systems designed with brain science in mind, or policing that understands nervous system regulation instead of just control. CEOs and organizational leaders. The workplace is one of the most influential environments in our lives. Trauma shows up as burnout, disengagement, or workplace conflict. Trauma-informed leaders create cultures of trust, clarity, and accountability, where people feel safe enough to innovate and strong enough to stay. Companies that embed psychological safety outperform their competitors. And that's not just theory, it's data. Educators and school administrators. Every classroom is filled with kids who may be dealing with divorce, violence, neglect, or anxiety. Trauma-informed schools train teachers not just to punish bad behavior, but to recognize it as a stress response. And that shift changes everything. Instead of suspension, you might see regulation. Instead of shame, you start to see resilience. And parents and partners, trauma-informed leadership isn't just for big systems. It's how you show up in your home. Do you explode when you're triggered, or do you learn, pause, regulate, and model calm for your kids? Do you repeat patterns of domination in relationships, or do you learn to repair, set boundaries, and rebuild trust? Trauma-informed leadership is how families break cycles and how marriages heal. and self-leadership. Maybe the hardest part. Trauma-informed leadership is also about how you lead yourself. Do you silence your own needs? Do you repeat the same patterns of burnout? Do you ignore the signals of your body until it collapses? Because self-leadership means recognizing that your nervous system, your story, and your healing matters. Because you can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. Let's bring this into today's world. Let's talk healthcare. After the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw entire systems on the edge of collapse. Hospitals that practice trauma-informed leadership, building in debriefs, protecting staff time, modeling transparency about what was known and unknown, they retained more workers and recovered faster. Military and first responders. Trauma-informed leadership is emerging as a critical factor in preventing suicide. Leaders who treat mental health support as mission critical, who model it themselves, see stronger unit cohesion and survival rates. Let's think about politics. Think about what happens when leaders use dehumanizing language, painting the other side as monsters. That language paves the way for violence. A trauma-informed political leader resists that pull. They argue fiercely, but they keep dignity intact. It's not weakness, it's civilization. And in business, companies like Patagonia prove this. Their mission and values aren't slogans. They're decision filters. They've scaled globally while staying anchored in integrity. And that's trauma-informed leadership at scale. Growth without empire, profit without exploitation. And where do we see it in community action? After natural disasters, communities with trauma-informed response systems recover faster. Why? Because leaders understand that people need more than supplies. They need safety, regulation, and dignity in how aid is delivered. And maybe the most sobering example, when leaders fail to be trauma-informed, the cost is catastrophic. Burnout, corruption, abuse of power, violence. These aren't random. They're what happens when trauma leads instead of being led through. So why now? Why is trauma-informed leadership crucial now? Because we're living in an age of compounded trauma. Global pandemics, wars, mass shootings, social unrest, natural disasters. Our nervous systems are overloaded. Our organizations are stretched. Our families are weary. And if we don't lead differently, we'll repeat cycles of harm. But if we do, if we learn to regulate, to build trust, to hold dignity, to repair, we can break these cycles. We can actually turn trauma into resilience individually and collectively. So what you'll learn in this series, this 40-part series, and the book and course that go with it, they're designed to give you both the framework and the tools. So here's a little taste. How to use trust as currency in leadership. How to hold steady in chaos when crisis erupts. How to harness both the power of one and the power of many to build movements. How to scale organizations without losing integrity. How to shape legacy that heals instead of wounds. How to use language as a beacon, knowing words outlive us. How to navigate nonviolence in a violent world without naivety or cruelty. And how to practice trauma-informed systems that heal not just individuals, but entire communities. Each episode will weave together history, psychology, neuroscience, and lived stories from battlefields to boardrooms, classrooms to courtrooms. You'll hear about Mandela and Malala, Lincoln and King, first responders and survivors, and yes, my own personal story as the throwaway daughter of a trafficking victim, a survivor of abuse, and a woman who learned to rise from the ashes into leadership. So why you should stay for the whole journey, because this isn't just a podcast series, it's an invitation. If you're a government official shaping policy, a CEO scaling a company, a pastor guiding a congregation, a teacher in a classroom, a first responder carrying the weight of daily crisis, a parent or partner trying to build a safe home, or simply a human being trying to lead yourself well, this series is for you, because trauma-informed leadership isn't about position, it's about presence. It's about becoming the kind of leader who steadies storms instead of spreading them. So why get the book, the course, and the training? The podcast gives you the framework. The book gives you the depth, the research, the case studies, the reflection questions, and the systems. It's the textbook of trauma-informed leadership. The course and training give you practice, the exercises, the role plays, the de-escalation toolbox, and the systems building templates. And here's what makes this especially valuable. The course is IACET accredited for CEUs. That means the training you complete here isn't just transformational for your organization or your life. It also counts towards recognized continuing education credits. You'll walk away not just with knowledge, but with tools that you can implement in every facet of your life. In your bedroom, in your boardroom, in your classroom, your family, your marriage, and your own self-leadership. If you're serious about changing how you lead at work, at home, or in society, I invite you not just to listen, but to read, train, and join the movement. So let me leave you with this. We live in a world where trauma is everywhere, but so is resilience, so is hope, so is healing. The difference is leadership. Trauma-informed leadership is how we stop repeating cycles of harm. It's how we build trust that lasts, systems that endure, and legacies that heal. It's how we rise up, not just individually, but collectively. And that's why this series matters. That's why the book matters. That's why the course matters. That's why the IACET CEUs matter. So join me for the full journey. Share it with your colleagues, your teams, your family. Because trauma-informed leadership is not just about saving organizations. It's about saving lives. I'm Krista Fee, and this is Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines. Rise up out of the ashes of your experience and lead your life with fire.
Become a Rise Up Hero sponsor to provide mental wellness and crisis response resources for those who serve country and community. Join us in the Rise Up movement today.